Just clicking it now. There we go.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So welcome everybody and welcome to our webinar on global oversight of the LSO network. And this is our first Sectoral Pharma Consulting webinar and hopefully will be the first of many to come. So please do let us know if there are areas that you would like us to cover through our webinars, and we will do our best to try and ensure we cover those areas. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Seema Jaitley. I've been in the industry for about 29 years now, working with small pharma companies, big pharma companies too. And I'm going to be working or presenting this webinar with my colleague Shelley Forward, who's been in the industry as well for about 15 years. So without further ado, we'll start now. Okay, so we're going to cover a little bit about the setup of the LSO network, looking at the LSO responsibilities, QPPV office, which is integral to that oversight, some of the metrics, challenges, and then we'll finish with a summary. So just as an introduction. So, of course, we know about the QPPV, the Qualified Person for Pharmacovigilance, and this can be an EU QPPV, global QPPV, which also has the EU responsibility, and their responsibility really is about overseeing the PV system and ensuring that we do have that continuous monitoring for product safety. But as part of that, they need to ensure that they know what is happening globally with regards to the product. And that is why the local safety officer or the local QPPV network is extremely important to help the QPPV to ensure that they do have a compliant PV system. And the LSO is there as a designated PV contact in a specific country. They oversee local PV compliance to ensure that that is all being managed appropriately, and importantly, act as that regulatory contact at the local level. So fluent in the local language, have that in-depth understanding of the local regulations, which can then be fed back to the QPPV and provide that interface between the global PV system and the PV department and the local regulatory authorities. And this will ensure consistency in reporting and compliance management, as well as timely reporting, not just of cases, but ADRs, and ensure that there's compliance overall in the PV system. So I think what's quite interesting is that over the years, certainly we'd been used to having an EU QPPV, but that requirement has really expanded globally now. And this is just to give you a bit of an idea as to where your local safety officers are required. So it isn't, whilst you do have the EU QPPV in the EU, you still need though local safety officers or local QPPVs within the EU itself, but then other areas as well, such as within Africa, Latin America, Australia, Asia as well, the CIS countries and the Arab states as well. So it's something that, or a requirement that is proliferating. And when you think about the rationale behind that, the fact that you've got somebody at local level who can act as that conduit between the regulatory authority and the global kind of department within the MAH, you can understand why it is so important to have those local people representing PV. Now, at the bottom, we have got this link here that shows you the EU requirements, and it's a guidance that just shows you where you require a local safety officer and what the requirements are as far as, you know, maybe education experience wise. Generally, it is, of course, the ability to speak the local language. And I think that communication aspect is very important when it comes to looking at your LSO and where those LSOs are required. So if we look at the setup of your network now, as we've been talking about, you need a local representative in some countries, obviously not all countries, but and this can be either at the marketing approval or at launch. And I think it's important to understand exactly what's required so that you can ensure that you have a local network that is compliant with the legislation and the regulations in those different countries. Again, again, whilst it might be easy to see that you need an LSO, what might not be quite so easy to understand is whether when that's required and whether that is at marketing approval or at launch. And that's something that you would need people at the local level to be able to tell you and guide you. There is a requirement for a deputy, an actual official deputy in some countries as well, but again, that's not in every country. And if it isn't in a country, you do need to consider the need for backup to ensure that there are no gaps with regards to the whatever support is being provided at the local level. There is a need usually to notify the national competent authority or the regulatory authority, and this can differ depending on which regulatory authority you're doing. You're reporting to. It may be that you need different documentation that's signed by, for example, the QPPV or the marketing authorization holder. And again, you need somebody at local level to be able to guide you towards that. There is the requirement as well for local portal registrations in some countries. For example, in Switzerland, you need to register for using Elvis. And again, you need somebody to guide you and advise you as to exactly what's needed. And that's where the person at the local level will be able to tell you. Now, I think what's important is to work with the marketing authorization holder to understand the launch plan, understand where products going to be registered as well, where marketing authorizations are going to go in, so that you can plan appropriately for those countries where you need to have a local safety officer and ensure that you will have somebody at the right time point. Again, there's no point in putting somebody in place across, the whole of the globe if you're only going to be concentrating on a few territories. But again, you do have to take into account, certainly for the EU, that there are some territories that you need somebody when you have marketing approval. And if you have a central authorization, then you'll need to have somebody in that country, even if you aren't going to be launching there. So just moving on now to the responsibilities, and we've kind of divided this up into four main areas. Of course, the PV system is an important area. Um, Here, there's a lot of input into the PSMF, but also there may be a requirement for a local PSMF. And this could be territories such as the UK or France, where there is a need to have a specific local PSMF, and even in the Arab states as well. So that is where responsibility of the LSO to ensure that the information contained in there is appropriate and also to have access to that. There's also oversight of the cases at the local level that are being received within the country, and having that understanding of what's being received and the reporting and compliance of not just cases, but other activities too. So it could be the aggregate reports. Also, to inform the QPPV office when there are some gaps, perhaps in the global SOPs and policies that would need then amending to ensure that local requirements are taken into account and that your global PV system is compliant for the local legislation and the requirements too. There could be CAPAs as well that have been ongoing that refer to local deviations, and where relevant at the country level, then the LSO would be involved in ensuring that those actions are put into place to manage those CAPAs. Risk minimization is obviously an important area, and whilst there is the development of risk minimization materials at the global level, you'll need to implement these at the local level, dependent on how the healthcare setup is at that country level, and make sure that it's fit for purpose there. Looking at the regulatory aspects, so regulatory intelligence, of course, is a big area. And whilst even, for example, in the EU, where you have the directive, the regulation, there are still nuances at local level that need to be taken into account. And having your LSO there who can then feed back all of those changes and provide you with that impact analysis as to how that will need to be reflected within your global PV system is extremely important. And of course, we've talked about this, that, the LSO is that link between the local authority and your global department and your QPPV. Need to ensure that we're meeting the local legislative requirements, ensuring that there is that maintenance of that local PV system as would be expected, and to liaise with the local authorities and be that voice for global at the local level. Where relevant, of course, submission of aggregate reports, although a lot of that is done directly from global, but again, to be that conduit between regulatory authority and the global department. Again, informing the country regulatory authority where required of any new signals. And again, this is country specific, but would need to be considered, for example, in territories such as, or countries such as Switzerland and the UK, where there is a requirement to ensure, and Australia, of course, to ensure that there is that information is passed on to the regulatory authority and to be there to support in inspections at the local level. For literature, I mean, this is a big area that is covered by local safety officers, looking at the local literature, whilst the global department will look at those big scientific databases. There are a number of local literature sources that need to be reviewed on a regular basis to look for cases, as well as important safety information for aggregate analysis that would then need to be sent through to the global department, depending on what is found there. And that is then maintained through screening your local journals and ensuring then that there is that holistic overview of your literature. Now, I think one of the important areas, very important areas, is that link into the local team. So not just your regulatory authority, but being able to be part of your cross-functional team at the country level and being a key member of that team, and again acting as that conduit into that local team, through to your medical department, your regulatory department at the local level, being able to understand what the commercialization plan is and input into that, to act as that local kind of point of contact for PV, to train your new starters within the country, on the PV requirements and the PV system as required, to support your local safety data exchange agreements, so where perhaps distributors are involved, and to follow up of cases, in local language, again, as required and as agreed with, your global department. And really is, as I said, that interface with regards to global PV and the teams at the local level. So I think I will be handing over now to Shelley, who's going to go into a little bit more of the specifics with regards to how we manage LSOs.
Thank you, Seema. So I'm going to kick off by just looking at the LSO onboarding process. It's an important process to manage, not only because of the many steps involved, but also because of the number of LSOs that will need to be onboarded, often all at the same time. So if we just look at the EU alone, there will be over 35 LSOs and backups that would need to be onboarded in this region. So that's why I've just put up there initially just to have a tracking form in place, just to track the whole process. Then obviously each LSO would need to be given an email address, a repository would need to be set up. SharePoint works well for this. Basically, it's just a central place to store any relevant documentation that the LSOs will have access to. And also, it's also a repository that the LSOs then have, where they can upload relevant country documentation to have a central repository to store that. The LSOs would need to undergo any company training, so any SOPs they need to be trained on, product training they need to undergo, job descriptions would need to be drafted and signed, CVs would need to be signed. Then there will be some extra SOPs and work instructions that need to be prepared and drafted, and I'm going to come on and talk about this at a later slide. But the initial prep needs to take place during the onboarding process, where the local safety officers can provide information on what actually needs to be written and included. As Seema touched on, any National Competence Authority notification and portal registration would be done during this onboarding process. Case listings need to be programmed. So these are case listings that are country specific, that LSOs need to receive on a daily or weekly basis, depending what's decided, just to give them oversight of cases from their specific country. So those need to be programmed, those line listings need to be programmed in the safety database. The LSOs need to provide their list of journals that they are going to be reviewing. and the justification for this, because we have seen that inspectors do ask as to why certain journals were chosen. And it's a good idea also just to have a time frame in mind as to how long you want this whole LSO onboarding process to take, because there can be some hiccups along the way, specifically some IT hiccups with logins, etc. So this diagram just really shows how the QPPV office acts as the interface between the local safety officers on the one side and the QPPV and global functions on the other side. The QPPV office facilitates the exchange of information, ensuring both sides are kept up to date and acting as the strategic hub to support and sustain these critical relationships. So it's very important to ensure ongoing communication, as you can see. And one of the main ways we can do this is through meetings. So having regular meetings. Now I've listed 3 regular meetings there on the right. The main one being the QPPV office team meeting, which is the team that runs the QPPV office, which is made up of the QPPV, the deputy QPPV, and then the QPPV office manager and deputy. This should happen on a weekly basis. Then the LSO group meetings should also be regular meetings that are held. I'm going to touch on those in a later slide. And then your QPPV generally also runs a QPPV oversight meeting, which is the QPPV office team attends that, and then as well as the QPPV, the deputy QPPV, and then core global functions. So that's just ensuring that everyone is kept up to date with the information they need to know about. So let's have a look at some of the roles and responsibilities specifically of the QPPV office. This is an integral part, as I've mentioned. So the QPPV office is run by the QPPV office manager and deputy in case of absences. As I mentioned, it is a conduit for the transfer of information. And some of the information I've just listed examples here that could be transferred is signaling information if the global team needs to let the LSOs know of any signals, any regulatory intelligence that needs to be communicated. Also case information. So if the LSOs become aware of a case, this needs to be transferred through to global in a timely fashion. And if also the opposite way, if global need the LSO to follow up on a specific case in local language, this also then needs to be transferred back down to the local safety officer. The global team can also send up or communicate updates of the PSMF with the LSOs. And that's just some examples of the transfer of information that occurs. The QPPV office should have its own email address, a specific email address. So it's a general mailbox that is accessible by the QPPV and deputy, as well as the QPPV office manager. And it's just a good place to have a repository to store emails. Then the QPPV office will also provide the LSOs with various trackers and templates. And here I've just given a few examples of some of these. So the QPPV office would provide an absence tracker where the LSOs can fill in when they're going to be absent and when their backup will be stepping in. Templates, some examples of templates is, or templates of trackers, should I say, is a case follow-up tracker should be provided to the LSOs so they can track the process of their follow-up of cases, and then also a literature review tracker so that the LSOs can track the review of the literature that they are doing in their country. The last one on there is a very important template that we provide to the LSOs to fill in, and this is a monthly report template, which basically the LSOs fill in on a monthly basis to basically describe the activities that they performed in that month, their KPIs, etc. And we have seen inspectors ask for this as well, just to show that the QPPV office has oversight of the LSOs. The QPPV office will also have to put various procedures in place. I'm going to come on to that in the next slide. We should also have, as the QPPV office, an escalation process. So this is just to ensure governance structures are in place if any escalations need to take place. Regular meetings I have touched on, but I just want to highlight specifically here the LSO meeting. It should be at least monthly. As I said, it's set up for the dissemination of information. It should be recorded and minuted, and the list of attendees maintained. Because again, this is what inspectors ask for when they come and look to see if there's oversight of the LSO network. They want to see a record of these meetings. We have found that face-to-face meetings are also very beneficial in building strong relationships between the LSOs and the QPPV office, and between the LSOs and the global team. Just in terms of making the LSOs feel part of the team. You know, they're all working remotely from their specific countries, and just gathering, if possible, we've tried it on an annual basis. It just works really well in developing those relationships and making them feel part of the team. Seema, if you just go back one slide for me, thank you. So this slide just looks at the SOPs and work instructions that are going to be needed, and as I mentioned, that are going to need to be written. So first and foremost is the QPPV Office SOP. This describes how oversight is maintained, what are the communication pathways, and what are the KPIs that are going to be tracked. Then the QPPV Office mailbox management, this is generally a work instruction, and this just looks at basically the management of the mailbox, how the emails are going to be checked and filed, etc. The LSO SOP is the overarching SOP describing the general activities and responsibilities of the LSOs. These include what I've listed, or not everything, but some of what I've listed in the box below is just some examples here. So it'll describe regulatory intelligence, how it's going to be gathered, how the literature review is going to take place, what meetings are going to be held, when is the backup going to come into play, etc. And then also, there are going to have to be some specific country work instructions that are going to need to be written. This is because some of the countries have specific local requirements that are specific to their country that are not going to be covered in the general LSO SOP. And some examples of countries that need these are Switzerland, France, Italy, Spain, and the UK. There are a few others, but those are just some examples of extra work instructions that are going to need to be written. So KPIs and metrics are very important to maintaining oversight of compliance. That's what this slide is showing. These are needed to show oversight during an inspection. It's important to identify what are going to be the relevant metrics and KPIs and how we're going to report on these on a regular basis. Obviously, these need to be agreed with global, and they're also described in the monthly report that the LSOs put together. Any feedback of these KPIs and metrics can be given at the LSO group meeting. And in the blue box there, I've just highlighted some examples of KPIs that we have seen that are good to track. For example, if the local safety officer becomes aware of a case, are they putting it through to global in a timely fashion? If the LSO is being asked to follow up a case, are they sending out the request to the reporter in a timely fashion? Literature review, are they doing it at the periodicity they should be doing it? And then are they keeping up to date with their training and doing it all on time? And this slide is just an example of how, as the QPPV office, we can create dashboards and show the global team in a visual manner how KPIs are being met. So for example, this slide shows case follow-up requests that have gone out over a monthly period, and we've broken it down into the different countries within the EU. So it's a nice way to present KPIs to the global team to give them an overall picture of metrics and KPIs. Back to you, Seema. Oh, Seema, you're on mute.
Thank you. That's good. Hopefully that's given you a bit of an overview of how to, really have that oversight of your LSOs, how to manage that. But of course, there are challenges. And I think, we've just detailed some of them here. Local regulatory requirements, they are very diverse. If you look globally where your LSOs are required and the different kind of legislative requirements. I mean, bringing that into a global PV system can be very difficult, and there can be a conflict with overall global kind of process and kind of thought process as well. So I think that is definitely a challenge. Terminology itself can be, consistent terminology can be an issue too. What does a valid signal mean? Is it the same in one country compared to another? And really understanding what that terminology translates to at local level is important. Time zone, of course, if you're looking at the world as a whole, that's going to be an issue. Normally what you end up doing is having two meetings, one that's for one time zone, kind of the Western, one for the Eastern, and that just works a bit better because you're able to manage then without people having to get up in the middle of the night to attend a meeting. You can get high turnover at the affiliate level. Again, it depends on how the affiliate is set up, how the local safety officers are integrated into that local setup as well. Onboarding, I think we have had some difficulties with onboarding, especially when it comes to the IT side of things, access to emails, access to repositories. That can take a bit of time to sort out, and that can be a little frustrating. And then I think ensuring there is that consistent policy kind of understanding and making sure that, again, as we were talking about the terminology, that everybody is on the same page. And as it occurs throughout the industry, there's always those resource constraints. Now, if we look at future directions, I guess where are we heading with the LSO network? It's becoming ever more important. I think we do have to use digital tools to really help that connection, that communication, having centralized safety portals, having areas such as your SharePoint where everybody can access information and input their data, upload their information as well is extremely important, as well as automated dashboards that help you to see and keep that oversight. Of course, artificial intelligence is becoming increasingly important as well, but you have to be careful. So there has been use of AI with regards to looking at what's required at the local level, but you do need to ensure that you've got somebody there that you can go back to check and make sure that whatever is coming or whatever is being presented to you is accurate. For example, in Brazil, it is very difficult to work out whether you need somebody that's part of the MAH, an LSO that's part of the MAH, or whether you can have a vendor LSO. And you can't use artificial intelligence to kind of tell you that you need somebody at local level. We are hopefully moving towards some more harmonization with regards to your global and local regulatory requirements, although it does feel like we take maybe one step forward and two steps back. So let's see where we head with that. But that is certainly where we should be heading. I think building resilience of the LSO network is where we will be heading as well. It's important to have that succession planning to ensure that, should there be gaps, that, you don't get into a situation where you're not able to function at a local level because you don't have that person in place and you haven't planned for having that person in place should something happen. There's obviously cross training. And I think importantly, the LSO network should be involved in global activities because it really keeps that connection kind of with that overall PV system. And I mean, the key is the collaboration, the communication, and further building that as we move forward. The LSOs generally have a really good collaboration with medical regulatory QA, and I think that will only get better. So in summary, I think we can see that local safety officers and QPPVs, even when not required at a country level, are extremely important in providing that link into what's happening at ground level. They are at the front line of what's going on in the real world setting. And really, drug safety is about the real world setting. Global is fine. However, we need to ensure that whatever we're wanting to put in place is translated appropriately into the patient at the patient level. Global oversight, though, does ensure that compliance, consistency, and manages that patient safety overall through the global PV system. But for success, we need that collaboration between the two, strong governance, communication, absolutely critical to ensure that we have a fully functioning, compliant PV system. And I'm going to stop there. And here we've got contact details for myself and Shelley, but are there any questions that we could answer here? So I think it's a lot of food there for you to think about. So please do reach out to us. I know we're coming up to time now, but reach out to us should you have any questions or if we can help in any way. Thank you.
Thank you.